right, listeners, welcome to season 3, and life is better with you in it. And so part of this season is talking about what it's like to be something else. And so we brought back Chris Conley to the podcast for this season because when he and I explored mental health, I had told him after the podcast, listen, bro, there's so many things we can talk about in mental health and the arena. I think it's so much more widely discussed now. So we'll talk about my own experience with mental health and what that means for me. And then we'll have some thoughts from the professional. So Chris, welcome back.
Hey, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Let's do it.
Heard. All right. So, listeners, this week we're going to talk about this really big, scary word called anxiety. And so, anxiety is this thing, and I have some preconceived notions about what anxiety is, how it manifests, but let's hear from the professional. So, maybe tell us what your textbook definition is, or maybe how you explain it to clients about what anxiety is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways you can go into talking about anxiety, but I'm going to keep it basic here. Anxiety is an emotional response that we have that is asking us to pay attention to something.
Mm,
Now, usually that response is characterized by worry or fear. Sometimes you can have physical manifestations of things like your heart rate is up a little bit, you're not sleeping as well. Um, sometimes people even have like they'll fidget a little bit or they'll get a
mm,
little sweaty or hot if they're in like really high anxiety. Um, but yeah, it's just an emotional response that you have, which can put some of those physical things in place. But really, yeah, it's just it's a signal to pay attention to what's going on in your world and assess what you need to do. I like to use the example of you think about like a smoke alarm in your house, right? So when you hear that beep, there's dozens of reasons that the smoke detector could be beeping. You need new batteries, you're cooking something and it's just getting a little out of hand in the kitchen, or your house is on fire and you need to get out.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
and so when that smoke alarm goes off, it is telling you, hey, pay attention, assess, figure out what needs to be done to alleviate the beeping. And so if it's as simple as change the batteries, cool, no worries, change the batteries. If it's, a little more extreme of like, you're burning something on the oven or on the stove, cool, man, gotta go, wave the smoke away or move the pan or whatever you need to do. And if it is as serious as like the house is on fire, then you get the hell out of the house. Um, so, but yeah, that's what anxiety does, man. Like, so you think about a couple situations. Maybe you're a student and you have a big exam, on a Friday, and you start feeling anxious on Wednesday and Thursday. Yeah, what is your anxiety trying to bring to your attention? When you have an exam,
Mm.
you probably should set some time aside to study or prepare or review, or make sure that your schedule's free, or make sure that you're feeling well, or all that sort of stuff.
So let me ask you a question. I
Sure.
have been learning all about anxiety in my own journey, and I think when you're something else, like me, you have probably a lot of pots on the stove, which somebody told me that last week. You always like to have a lot of pots on the stove. You always like to be doing something. And I'm like, that's not me. But when you're something else and you are working with anxiety, does everybody have anxiety? Or does it range? Does it come up in a season and you work through it and then you no longer have anxiety, right? Like if it's telling you to pay attention to something and assess, took notes because I'm going to keep these notes for later. Does everybody have it?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, everybody has a little bit of anxiety wired in to them because it's a natural, I would even say, God-given part of us to bring attention to. Another example I like to use when I'm talking about it is anxiety is the thing that when you're walking through the woods and you hear a rustle, in the leaves,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is the thing that says, oh, there could be a bear out there. So let's check and make sure. And so that's a natural thing. It's a good thing because what you don't want to do if you don't have any anxiety, you walk through the woods, hear leaves rustling, and not care at all. And then
Yeah.
before you know it, a bear is ripping your face off, right? Or go back to the smoke detector. You don't want to hear the smoke detector beeping, and well, I don't care. So now I'm like in my house and I'm burning up, right? So it is a natural thing that everybody has to some degree. Now people manage it differently.
Mm.
um, People, some people are much more chill about how they move through that process. And then some people, they really lock into anxiety to where in the mental health field we call it a little bit disordered, maybe, where we're having really high levels of anxiety, no apparent reasons why that it's going on.
Like no big
um,
events or no big life events that
no
are
big
like, that's
events,
probably why.
or a small event, like go back to our kid who's got to take an exam, and I got an exam Friday, but I'm going to fail it and my life is going to be over and I'll never make anything of myself and nobody will love me because of that and all my goals will fail. That's where it's getting out of proportion to the event that's at
Mm.
place. And so that's when you get into like disordered anxiety, which I don't actually like the word disordered, but that's kind of the vernacular we use in the field.
Heard. So everyone has it. You think it's like this kind of God-given thing that helps us have awareness and pay attention to things. And it sounds like there are some times where it can be heightened, where you maybe have to take more action or just be more aware of what's going on, either in your life, in your mind, to be able to manage it. And so one of my questions was like, how do you see this show up for people, right? So this is like a big word. And so whether we may be curious if we're something else like me and we're kind of managing this anxiety and what it means to have anxiety, or we're trying to support someone, how do you think it shows up for people? Or maybe like what have you seen, how have you seen anxiety show up in people?
I
Whether
mean,
normal
anxiety,
or like, like cray cray for
yeah.
yeah.
Well, anxiety shows up, I think, all the time. I mean, you take the couple examples we've already kind of looked at. Um, but I mean, anything like social situations, like maybe someone's going on a first date, and what if I wear something and they don't think it looks good? Or
Mm.
maybe somebody's going to a job interview, same thing. What if the way I'm dressed and it doesn't look good? Um, the healthy response to that would be to take a breath and assess, right? Like, well, what am I wearing and do I think it looks good? Where am I interviewing and do I think I am dressed appropriate? Because I mean, you may not be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're, you got your sweatpants on and you're going to go interview for a big job and you're like, oh man, they're going to judge me or something, like your anxiety might be telling you like, hey, just, well, maybe reconsider what you're planning to do here.
Mm.
And sometimes you assess and then it's like, no, I'm fine. I'll be fine. This is appropriate to dress for the situation. Um,
So do you
we see
feel
that.
like anxiety can be a couple of different responses? And when I mean like by that, like it's like a mental thing, right? Like you're kind of talking to yourself and you're either like in a thought spiral and it's getting aggressive, or it's like, hey, like you're feeling nervous. Why are you feeling nervous? And then is it a physical thing too? Where like sometimes like your body takes over. I ask because I think I encountered a situation and I'll share with you what happened, where like you can like be physically sick. Can you get physically sick
Mhm.
by having it?
Yeah, sure. All kinds of physical things go along with anxiety when it gets really, uh, gosh, what's the word? Heavy. When it gets really heavy, a lot of things can go along with the body. Um, I firmly believe that is still like your just alarm system going off. If you have that job interview and you are sitting there like sick to your stomach thinking about going, then your body is saying, no, like we really need to assess what we're doing here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether that is to assess like, am I prepared? Am I ready? Do I even want this job? Um, or, and this is a little bit further down the path on talking anxiety, or am I buying into thought processes that aren't necessarily true? Uh, that's kind of the big part of anxiety when it gets into that disordered category
Mm.
is we start wrestling with thoughts that maybe aren't fully true or aren't true at all.
Hmm. Okay. So it most of the time, I think I help people, and we're going to talk about maybe how we can manage anxiety if we think we have it, right? And maybe like what some like tips and not tricks, but more like tips in like managing it, and then maybe knowing when to ask for help, and then also like how we support other people. It's funny you keep talking about like interviews because I'm a recruiter by trade, right? That's one of my jobs, many job
Mhm.
titles that I carry. I like to carry like the title of author. I don't know what that means, but I like to carry the title of recruiter. And so, as a recruiter, I manage these interviews, and I can tell typically right off the bat if somebody's nervous, right? They start to stutter their speech, they're really fidgety in the screen, or they are very timid and quiet. You can see their throat like drop like when they're swallowing. I don't know if I've just paid attention to it so long from doing it. But as
Yeah,
soon as
sure.
like I start to see these alarms go off, I take the conversation like 5 steps back and I'm like, hey, Jen. I start to like say something to try to make them laugh because laughing sometimes helps, gets them out of the nervousness. I don't know why, but I will totally make fun of myself or like talk about the weather or my crazy dog Chuck to help like get the nerves out of the conversation, and then I find it's like a much better conversation, and I'm like, oh, this is the real you, this is who you are. So I do that as a recruiter where I help people in
Yeah,
interviews because I love people. I want to be always people focused, and I feel like that will sometimes come up, especially depending on the roles
sure.
you're recruiting for. Now.
Yeah, well, you're alleviating some negative thought processes that person might be having, right? Like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm gonna go interview for this position. This person has the potential to like give me a job or not give me a job, and if their anxiety is really heavy, they may go into some of the things we were just saying a moment ago, like, what if I don't get it? And if I don't get it, I'm not gonna be able to have a career, or my wife is gonna be disappointed in me, or my parents are gonna give me hell, or or just, whatever. And that is all kind of being built up on the idea of my interaction with this recruiter is important, which it
Yeah.
is. Like, it is. Like, you
Yeah.
should take that serious. But when it starts getting out of hand like that in the thought processes, I think by you of giving them that approach, you're relieving some of that tension, and allowing them to kind of come back down to like, okay, why am I thinking about I'm not going to have a job in 10 years based off of this conversation happening today?
Yeah. I never knew that I would be releasing the tension, but I guess maybe that is what I do when I do that to try to just like, I guess I thought I was more like changing the subject, but hey, if I'm relieving some tension, that's helpful too. So, I talk about how I'm like helping people manage it through these job interviews, specifically in my day job. What are some tips that maybe you can give us to support someone that we may think has anxiety or has openly talked about it? Do you have any maybe like tips or pointers or maybe like conversation starters that you can share with any of our listeners who may be supporting someone dealing with anxiety, going through like a transitional thing? And then I'll talk about how we help ourselves and then maybe see if we need to get into.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're just like, a spouse or a friend or somebody, it's being curious first,
Mm.
not jumping to assumptions. So, maybe your friend gets a little snappy with you, and if you kind of have an idea that they're a little bit of an anxiety person, saying, hey, like, I wonder what's going on in their head, or I wonder what they went through today, because it's not like them to snap at me like that. Now that could be hard because sometimes we want to snap right back,
Mm-hmm.
because we
Mm-hmm.
all like we're also people too. So,
Yeah.
I don't know that we can all do that perfectly all the time, but be curious. The other thing I think is real important, especially if they have like shared with you, like, yeah, hey, I struggle with anxiety sometimes. Like, ask permission to be a support. Don't just assume you should or
Oh.
that they want that from you. I mean, most of the time people do. Uh, but you want that permission to say, hey, like, is it cool if I check on you sometimes? Or, hey, if I notice that you're getting a little anxious, is it okay if I try to like give you a hug or talk to you or whatever they've identified might help them? Because sometimes, sometimes the help isn't welcomed in those relationships, or maybe not even in the whole relationship. Maybe it usually is, but they're having a moment where they're just like, nope, I just need to be in my head right now, and if you talk to me, it's gonna get worse, or
Mm.
so you want that permission, and then asking them like, hey, what helps you? I know one thing that helps me when I face anxiety is exercise. So, that's not something somebody can do for me per se,
No,
but
they can't get you on the
but
treadmill. Move your legs.
no, but I mean, you ask my fiance, like she'll tell you days I exercise versus when I don't. Like maybe not every single time, but she can tell a difference in like my mood if I haven't done it, especially if I haven't done it for a couple days. Or like I do it first thing in the morning. So if we have a day where I missed it in the morning and I couldn't get to it till the afternoon, like you can pick up on that I'm a little more grouchy or prone to some anxiety.
Okay. So a couple of tips for how to support people that may have it or we're curious, we think they might be dealing with it. So the first thing is we're going to be curious first. So we're going to be thinking instead of like it's a vendetta against us, so maybe what they've gone through the day, we're going to ask them permission to be support. I guess I've never thought about it that way. I would just assume that somebody would want help. And so I'm like, give them help. So it's good to
Yeah.
maybe ask first. And then
Well,
the
the reason here's why the permission part is
yeah,
so important.
tell me
Like
that.
like anxiety is paired with negative thoughts. Like if you are going through anxiety, you are having negative thoughts. Now, sometimes you're having true thoughts, right? Okay, my house might be on fire. The smoke detector is true. That's a negative thought, but it might be true.
Yeah.
There might be a bear in the woods. That might be true. So a negative thought isn't necessarily a bad thing, but anxiety thoughts are almost always negative thoughts. So I'm gonna blow this job interview and nobody's gonna love me again, right? That's not necessarily a true thought,
No,
right?
no. But it's a
Um,
negative one that comes up.
it's a negative one. And so if somebody's not ready to get support from you, you may compound some of their negative thoughts, right? So if I'm walking, like, let's say I had a bad day, let's say I had a bad day at work and I'm kind of like, oh gosh, man, I don't know why people let me be their therapist. I'm this and that, which thankfully I very rarely have days like that, but it happens.
Yeah,
So
because
if I'm
you a straight shooter. I dig it.
if I am having a day where I'm already wrestling with some negative thoughts about myself, and then I confide in a friend, hey, I'm just having an anxious day today, and they say like, well, I don't know why, like you're great, or why you shouldn't feel that way. One, are you shaming my feelings unintentionally? I know that's
Yeah.
not your intent, but
Yeah.
now or well, if you think I'm a good therapist, like then do I have you fooled? Or like how can you, if you can see it but I can't see it, what the hell is wrong with me that I can't? So you can double down maybe on somebody's negative thought processes.
I never thought about it that way. Hmm. All right. And so the last thought that you have talks like about like asking them like outright, like what do you think helps you or what helps you? And maybe do you want my
Yeah,
right? And so like leading with that. Okay. Those are some great tips, listeners. And definitely something to ponder as we think that everybody wants our help. Not really. And sometimes our help might make it worse. And that's definitely something I'm going to take away from this conversation. Because most times, like, I want to solve people's problems, which is what I do all day long, right? In HR and consulting. You're
yeah,
like, you see a problem, you literally get paid to fix it. I get paid to talk to people about their problems. And then I'm like, hey, here's solutions. And not everybody wants a solution, so that's good. And sometimes they probably have to figure it out on their own,
yeah,
especially when it comes to anxiety. So I'll share two stories. So we'll pivot to kind of talking about what happens if it's you. What happens if it's you
sure,
that is working through anxiety? So in one of my books that's coming out, in the book that's coming out mid-October, I'm not going to say a release date yet because I think it's October 15th now, but we're not sure. We're trying to get that thing edited. And one of the chapters talks about me going through this thought spiral. And so one Saturday morning, everything's totally fine. I'm having coffee. It's a quiet, chill morning. And then all of a sudden, these like thoughts start coming in. And so I named this girl who's giving me these thoughts? Becky, because I'm trying to separate myself from these thoughts. And right, and I do
She's
this.
like one of your inside out characters.
Yeah, she's one of my characters. And so she was so loud and so like loud that day. Like I still remember sitting on the couch and Bill's like, my husband's looking at me and he's like, dude, you are unwell. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. So I tried the exercise thing, right? Let me just walk this out by myself. We'll put some headphones in, call it. Voices got louder. Tried using the phone, right? So I'm going on my phone, social media, thinking like being around people and talking to people online will help. That didn't help. What finally did help though was writing down my thoughts. So I took a piece of paper, right? And I wrote down everything that I was thinking. Okay. And then I
Okay.
actually tried to circle the things that were true. That was true. And I was like, damn it, she took a whole day. But it's hard to realize when like those thoughts you're supposed to assess you should do something with. And then like if it's real or not, and how it
Yeah.
can compound and get worse. And so I'll
Well,
share
I like that you said like you circled what's true because that is at least the way I view things and the way I try to do my therapy work. Like my clients get sick of hearing me say, "Well, what's true about that?" Because that's the anxiety. Like if your anxiety is getting into that disordered category, you're probably entertaining or at least experiencing thoughts that are half truth or not truth,
Mhm.
right? Oh man, I burnt dinner tonight. My family's going to think I'm a terrible mom. Well,
Mm,
maybe they're not going to be thrilled with dinner, but are they
mhm.
going to think you're a terrible mom? That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what's true about that? That's a good question to ask yourself. So I'll share another story, and this one just happened recently. And like, for listeners on the pod, I've been kind of navigating this like therapy thing and talking to someone because I am doing a lot of new things. And with doing new things, I'm learning about myself that sometimes when I take on too many new things, I'm trying to be everything all at once, and it gets hard to be able to compartmentalize things and then figure out like what's next, right? So like as a business owner, I do feel like I'm always thinking about it. I'm always like, oh, there's another idea, or like, hey, that person could be a potential opportunity, or like, hey, that person might need a new job. Like I should share this opportunity because I'm thinking about it, right? I'm thinking about how to help. Especially when it comes to HR too, and how I can try to add value to people's lives. It's what I want to do. I think it's very clear that God is like, you're about people, but that can mean 20 million different fucking jobs. And so trying to
Hmm.
define what that means as a small business owner can feel overwhelming. And so
Sure.
recently I went on a bucket list trip. We went to Seattle, so we went to San Juan Islands. I went with my cousin, who's basically my sister, and we went away for like 4 days. So obviously I have saved up for this trip. I decided to totally splurge and get first class tickets because I wanted to get right on the plane. I knew I was gonna like do the focus of work while I was on the plane because it was a long ride. And then once I got there, I can enjoy myself. So everything goes as planned, right? Almost missed that flight to Pennsylvania. But everything goes as planned. I'm on the plane working. I'm killing it. I'm making money while on the plane, which always makes me feel great. Don't know why. Why? I don't know. And so when we got there, after about 15 hours of travel, lack of sleep, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I'm pretty sure I was having like a like anxiety attack or whatever. So I have no idea what's going on, but in my body I started just feeling nauseous. I started getting really warm. I could not sleep. I tried to put myself back to bed. I could not. And I'm like, I don't know what I need. I don't even know what's wrong because like I don't have any responsibility of my kids. I don't have my job to do. I don't even have any interviews like scheduled today. Like we're good to go. We're just going to see some whales, hopefully. So we went for a walk at 4 a.m. around Friday Harbor in San Juan. I tried watching a show because I was like, if I watch a really intense show, I'm gonna like have to focus on that show. Try being on social media. Didn't help.
Hmm.
Turns out I ended up puking. Nothing, just water. And it probably took me about a good 4 hours to kind of like come around from that. So by the time like we got up, I was like, let me just shower. I tried to take a really hot shower. So I was thinking if it's like really hot, it'll like kind of work it out of me. That didn't really help either. But by that time I was like, it's 8:30. Like, let's just go. We are only here for a short amount of time. Let's go get breakfast. And then it started to pass because it was like, we're busy. I talked a lot about like what my fears were, the business, the book, all the things that are going on. And it was like an out of body experience. And so then at the end of the day, I have a huge headache. So I take
Yeah.
3 Advil and I'm like, dude, cousin, what happened? What happened? And she's like, I think you had an anxiety attack. And I was like, I think I did too. Because and I don't know what happened. And so was it like the travel and then the lack of sleep and then the time change? Maybe, but like I tried all of these tips. And so maybe like a question for you, like, what do you do when none of the tips work? Does it just sometimes have to pass? Because I feel like for me, that in that moment of like knowing like I'm having this out of fucking body experience,
Yeah.
I have nothing to worry about. I'm totally safe. My kids are in such good hands. They're already having breakfast because it's 3 hours ahead. They're ready for a dude's day. So they're not missing me because they were asking when I was leaving so they could play PlayStation with dad. Like, what do we do when you run out of options? Or does it just
Yeah.
kind of have to pass? I've been wondering that myself now that I've kind of like been like, well, what happens next time? Because I was like, well, I need a solution for next time. Like, what's the thing? What's the thing?
Yeah. So anxiety attacks like that. Some people call them anxiety attacks, some people call them panic attacks.
Mm.
I've
Is
had
it
them.
the
They're not
same verbiage or is it different?
there may be some nuanced differences, but they're
Okay.
basically the same.
Okay.
I I've had them. They suck. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what? But I'm going to tell you, I think the mechanism is the same. Is that whether you're conscious or not of it,
Okay.
you're experiencing some sort of fear, stress, worry, maybe just the discomfort. If you're somebody who loves their routine and you're out of your routine, and like you can say to yourself, and I'm not assuming this of your specific
Yeah.
situation, but like you could say
I've
to
never
yourself,
shared
"Hey,
that outside of like 3 people who know that. So there's gonna be a
okay,
lot of people who now know this.
what you can say to yourself, hey, the kids are with their dad. They're going to be great. Hey, they have everything they need, et cetera, et cetera. But it can still be so just uncomfortable to your routine, or you could still, again, even if it's on a subconscious level, be wrestling with a little bit of mom guilt for
Mm,
not being
mm-hmm,
there,
mm-hmm.
that your brain and body are just telling you, like, hey, something's not okay. And you're like, I can't figure out what it is. And that's where like deeper therapy work can help when you start figuring out like what's underneath what's going on there. Because like you like the way you just told it, you're like, I have no idea what I was anxious about because everything was set. Well, there was something going
Yeah.
on that maybe you weren't aware of. My experience with panic attacks, and thank God I haven't had a significant one in years. But shortly after my dad passed away, um, I woke up probably 2 or 3 nights later. I woke up in the middle of the night, convinced I was dying, convinced like this is it. I'm done. And it was very scary, and like no reason to believe, like no logical reason to believe
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm pretty good health. I had nothing going on that would make me feel otherwise. But I'm wrestling personally at that time of my life. My dad died pretty young. He's in his like mid 50s.
Yeah, it's
And
young.
so underneath the hood of my subconscious is, there's no control over anything. Anybody could go anytime. And, so I just woke up. And what I've found though with that is, and I probably, it's probably irresponsible to say this as a blanket statement for everybody. So
We do what we want in this
this
podcast.
this this is just my experience. After I've had a couple of those, I started recognizing like, okay, hey, when I wake up and like I'm breathing heavy, I know what's happening. And
Mm,
I've been through this twice, and I know it's not what I think is happening. Um, and then I would get up and I would go to my bathroom. I would look myself in the eyes in the mirror, and I would drink water slowly because I think that helps regulate the body a little bit, gives the brain something to do that's not high energy or high tension.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
would just look at myself and like, hey, you're good. You're not dying. You're fine. And, you know, 10, 15 minutes would bring myself relatively down. It'd still be hard to go back to sleep or, whatever, but it's just learning about what's going on when you get into that level of anxiety and that level of panic. It's like really doing the hard work of like what is under the hood here that
Mm-hmm.
is sparking that stuff on.
So, in your professional terms, do you feel like, we can have these mechanisms, right? Like you've said that exercise really helps, drinking water slowly and looking yourself in the mirror and telling yourself you're okay. I've never tried that, so that's something good to maybe try. Do you feel like it does have to pass? Like, because it sounds like sometimes you can make it stop, but I think it's like if it's in your mind, like how do you help yourself get on with it or like get it to like move a little quicker? Can you?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it does just have to pass.
Mm.
Um,
And you get a killer headache
Unfortunately,
later.
yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, there's not magic tricks or magic therapy buttons we can push that just alleviate or fix these things, but they you go back to where we started, they are your they're signaling you to pay attention to something. Right now, we started earlier by talking about, hey, if you're feeling a little nervous before a job interview, pay it like, are you prepared? Did you do your
Mhm.
resume? Did you dress appropriately? Low level compared to like panic attack. But if you find yourself having consistent anxiety attacks, it may be more of an abstract um, existential thing to pay attention to, right? You may not have a panic attack and be like, oh, I get it, I was really stressing about this and that happened. It may be like, there's something going on in my thought processes or in the things I'm experiencing, or maybe I've had some trauma in the past I'm not even aware of that's influenced how I think and perceive things. And so the work of that could be a long task.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely a difference between like, okay, like me, like we've got regular anxiety, right? We think about regular things. We think about the bills and paying bills and managing childcare and doing all of the things. And then it sounds like you've said like, if things start to escalate, you start to have more, that's kind of the time when you seek help. I know for me, I had to like look inside and be like, is this happening enough for me that I need to like talk to somebody about this? And then there were people who I trusted, who I was like, tell me what you're seeing about me. I can handle this feedback from you because I trust you and I know that you're always in my corner. So like you're gonna tell it to me straight whether I want to hear it or not. So tell me what you think. And the feedback was very clear that it was like want to go like work this thing out because things are going on. So listeners, you've got maybe some good tips to help if you're navigating maybe an anxiety attack or managing higher levels of anxiety. You can look yourself in the mirror, drink your water real slow, tell yourself you're okay. You can get some exercise, sometimes getting your mind busy. You can write notes
Yeah.
about what the things that you're thinking, the thought process, and then figuring out like here's what's true and only circle the things that are actually true, not the things that you think might be true because you're going to just say bad shit about yourself. And then
Yeah.
you might want to ask some people and be humble enough to ask some people what's going on because there could be something more that's going on that you need to get into. Do you feel like in your practice and when you're navigating this, do you feel like anxiety is a topic that comes up a lot? Do you think it is
Almost everybody. Almost
almost
everybody.
everybody? Damn, really? And how many patients do you think you see in a year?
Well, you're not gonna come see me if you're fine.
Yeah,
you
that's true.
know,
That's true. Okay.
most
Okay.
most of
Part
the
of your job.
time. But I want to add a couple to what we were just saying. You think about like the drinking the water. Uh, if you Google grounding techniques for anxiety, that's where you're gonna find a bunch of tools like that. And the idea of that is something that helps bring your mind and body back to reality by taking a little bit of the tension off of what's going on. So
Mm.
for me, that's where the drinking water helps. some people will do exercises like, okay, let me count 5 things in my office that are different colors, and then 4 things in my office that are different textures. And let me find 3 different pictures, like something just to give simple, like not complicated tasking to get your brain just to redirect a little bit.
I've heard too of like literal grounding, and I sometimes do this too to just be more mindful. Like, especially sometimes before I hop on a call, if I know it's going to be a hard call, I go outside barefoot. I know it's so,
Yeah,
but is it
yeah,
like
there's a
a
lot
thing?
of, yeah, there's a lot of like, hippie science out
Yeah.
there that says that's good for your body and everything. But it's anything that brings you back down to reality. So,
Mm, mm.
go sit with the puppy for a minute and just, throw the ball, and all you're doing is throwing the ball with your dog. Sit with the cat on your lap and just pet the cat and, notice the fur and like take in the textures and the feelings. Um, that's what you're aiming for with grounding. Deep breathing is a big one if you can do that. And I'll walk my clients through it, and I'm like, don't just, it's not just sitting there going like, it's like put your hand on your heart so you can feel your heartbeat, and you can feel your lungs move up and down, and just breathe. And there's all kinds of things you can do with that.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Another
listeners, you're gonna have to Google the grounding techniques for sure.
Yep, I'm gonna give you one more tool,
All right, tell us.
and it's called Socratic questioning.
Mm,
If it comes out of like Stoic philosophy, but if you Google Socratic questions worksheet, you will find something that it gives you. I want to say there's 10 to 12. I don't remember. I didn't look at it before we hopped on, but it gives you like 10 to 12 different ways to examine the thought you're having. So, for example, you burnt dinner, you're like, oh my gosh, my family's going to think I'm a terrible mom, a terrible wife. It'll ask you, is the thought you're having black and white, or is it really more complicated than that? Um, is this, what's the evidence for your thought that you're a terrible mom? What's the evidence against your thought that you're a terrible mom? Well, I got them to all their appointments this week. Great, great. So it's just a bunch of different questions that a lot of people find helpful, but it's a tool you have to like take time to do. It's not like I'm having a panic attack. Let me read these. No, like you have to like
this is
sit
gonna be my
down.
quick fix.
It's almost like an aftermath, like, oh my gosh, I really lost it on my spouse today. What was I thinking? And then like let me examine it together, or
Mm,
examine it outside of the moment to build some more awareness. It's almost like, going to the gym a little bit. You have to like do it over and over. And some people will get to a point where if they'll engage in that exercise, their brain will just start to do it automatically over time.
wow.
Where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad mom because I burped. That's silly, man. It's just friggin' Taco Tuesday. It's gonna be
Right,
fine,
right.
and the kids are
What
happy, and
Wendy's is for.
they'll eat whatever.
They will.
Right, all those things.
Mm,
And then one thing that's also really important, with anxiety, and I would even say depression as well, just in case anybody's listening. We don't go
yeah.
down depression.
That
Like
might be up
see your
another podcast episode. It's a good idea.
but like see your doctor, man. Like
Yeah,
there can be things just going on with your biology too.
yeah.
Um, Hormone levels can be off. If you have health concerns like diabetes or other things with your cardiovascular health, that stuff can get your blood pumping quicker. That stuff can get your heart beating faster. And so you may be kickstarting some anxiety through the biological processes.
Mm,
Um, and then, there are things like cortisol levels in your body, which manage stress, your adrenal glands, that, the things that shoot off like all your different stress hormones and chemicals. And if you have just a physical issue going on there, you can be sitting like, well, I'm doing therapy and like I don't think I'm a bad mom. Like I really don't think I'm a bad mom, but like I'm still bugging out. Like it could
yeah,
be
I'm
as
still
simple
bugging
as
out.
that. Uh
Mhm.
so that's all I like. I've gotten in the habit of anytime I take on a new client asking, when did you get your last physical? Did they do a blood panel? And if you haven't done it in a year or two, I would highly recommend you go do that. Um, Like
Mm,
I learned for me because I have some depressive tendencies, and I learned for me that like vitamin D and K and iron was low in my blood. And like that was a contributing factor to why I would get a little lethargic sometimes.
yeah, yeah.
And
Damn. And so what, do they just give
so
you vitamins or they're like, hey, you probably need to up your intake of like this type of food that helps with those?
either or, I just
Yeah,
start taking over the counter vitamin supplements, and it's like part it makes a big difference for me. So
yeah, for sure.
uh
Wow.
so you can't forget the importance of making sure like your body is in tune. Because when we think about anxiety, we always think about mind and thoughts, and very valid. A lot of times that's the culprit, but sometimes I like to tell us it's in the depressive category. But when I was a resident, which is a counselor who's working on getting their professional license from the state, I saw a teenage girl who suicidal ideation all the time, tried all the medicines. We tried the best therapy I could do at the time, found out that she had a thyroid imbalance.
Holy shit.
And they fixed her thyroid imbalance, and like within a month, majority of the suicidal depressive stuff was gone. So check with your doctor too if this is a chronic thing that you experience.
What do you
Check with your
determine as
doctor.
chronic? What do you think is chronic? Do you think if somebody like sits there and struggles with it for like a couple weeks, a couple
Yeah,
months,
let me
like,
say, yeah, by chronic
yeah.
I mean like consistent. And that, especially if you're like, I genuinely don't know what I'm nervous about today.
Mm,
Like if you can pin it to like, oh, I got that job interview, or me and my spouse have been fighting, or there's going to be layoffs at work, like cool, you have stuff precipitating that. But if you're like, I genuinely don't get it, man, like got a great marriage, great job, great kids, great friends, I just don't get it, that might be worth going.
heard. Listeners, there's so much to unpack here. Um, that I think you're probably going to need to listen to this thing twice to get a good sense of this. But I've loved how we've kind of navigated like what anxiety is. We've talked a little bit how it manifests and how it may show up for people, what to do and how to support people when you think that they may be going through it or you think that they're dealing with it, especially if they've talked to you about it before. And then things for us to consider, and also that important piece of like your actual biology in your body. So, listeners, you've heard it first from a professional. Chris, thank you so much for sharing your brain with this
Anytime. I
season.
love coming on and talking with you.
Love it. And so, listeners, when you're something else, you may have some like, little anxious things that you're going to be working on. So, I hope that this has been helpful. Feel free to share. We'll get some links too for this Socratic question worksheet. Maybe you can help me find that. And then we will see you on the next week. Sound good?
All right.
All right. Have a great week, listeners.